hello, ladies and gentlemen, members of the Institute, colleagues, friends, family. Thank you so much for being here. I really do want to express my gratitude for this accolade. It really does mean a lot. And thank you so much, Rahana, for nominating me. It's really lovely to have that validation for the work that I've been doing, so thank you so much. But I do have to say that, of course, this work is never an individual sport. It's always a team sport. And I have been so lucky to have people on the bus with me all the way through my career who've just been amazing experts and so generous with their advice and their expertise in helping me and us collectively solve these challenges of public health that Brett was touching on earlier on. I'd also like to thank the Institute for really championing this point of sustainable social value creation. It's something that I think is becoming increasingly important to our students, as Prof McPhee was saying, to our consumers, to our funders, to our investors. And I'm also very honoured to be in such impressive company with the fellow people who've been inducted into the Hall of Fame this year and in previous years. I feel, as I say, very, very honoured. We've heard a little bit about planetary health tonight already, but you may be wondering exactly what that is. I know it can sound a little woo-woo, a little Star Trek, but essentially what it is achieving the best human health we possibly can for all peoples in this generation and next generations, while also making sure that we are protecting, maintaining and restoring the natural environment on which our health absolutely depends. We know that the quality of our air, the quality of water, the quality of our food, our access to nature all has an incredibly important impact on our health. But I think in the West, we've often forgotten that. We've become a little bit separated from that. But of course, our First Nations brothers and sisters have never forgotten that, and they understand this extremely deeply. And I would very much like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which we're on today, and any Aboriginal First Nations people who are with us today as well. So, as we've all been reflecting a little bit about our journeys to this point, I've been doing similarly, partly because of this accolade, but also because of my link with Baku, as Brett mentioned. So I was at the COP29 conference last week in Baku as part of the health delegation from Monash and from Australia. And I was constantly being connecting with Azeri people who were saying, oh, is this your first time in Azerbaijan? Because that's what they were expecting an answer of, oh, yes. But actually, I'd been in Baku at the end of the 1990s. And that year was a really pivotal year for me. I was working for the International Committee of the Red Cross in the prisons in Azerbaijan on a tuberculosis control program. And it was a particularly difficult program because of, A, the context of prisons, but also secondarily because there were very, very high levels of multi-drug resistance. And the drugs we had were not effective against multi-drug resistance. Not only were they not effective, they were sometimes making that resistance worse. And that was really the first indication for me that medicine has its limits. And it also really made me start thinking about what else I could do to help these prisoners who were suffering from TB, many of whom were dying, many of whom were very severely ill. And it made me start looking at other evidence-based interventions from other sectors. So looking at ventilation, looking at ultraviolet light to kill the tuberculosis bacteria, looking at the importance of nutrition, security, physical activity. And I think the other thing that it taught me was that people's behaviours can be logical, even if they're health harming in the context in which they're in. And it really did make clear to me the kind of structural and administrative violence that we can sometimes put on people. The other thing that happened for me in Azerbaijan was I met my husband in an Irish pub. And you know, there's always an Irish pub in pretty much any town that you go to. And, you know, he has been absolutely my rock. He's also been my personal logistician over these last 25 years. And he's also been extremely good at keeping my feet on the ground and, again, reminding me of the limits to medicine. So fast forward through, you know, these next 25 years, what I found myself doing is wanting to constantly get upstream of the health problems. I didn't want to be the doctor dealing with people with preventable diseases and not being able to offer them, you know, adequate treatment. I wanted to be able to stop those illnesses before they happened. And it's rather, as Desmond Tutu said, there comes a point when you have to stop pulling people out of the river and go upriver to see why they're falling in. And so that's what I have really tried to do. And it really has two implications. One of them is that you have to move away from the individual to the population, to start thinking about those structures, those policies, those systems that we have put in place that are either helping or harming our health. And the other thing that it makes you do is realise that you have to work with other sectors, that health cannot solve these problems on its own. And I think that's something that perhaps people outside of health maybe don't realise, is that when you look at the health gains that we've had in the West over the last, say, 2 centuries, only about 20% of those gains are due to health care, the medicines, the treatments, the lab tests, etc. The remaining 80% has been about improvements in socio-economic circumstances, improvements in education, good jobs, good housing, clean water, safe food. And so that's why working with other sectors is so very important. But there has been there are 3 kind of implications or consequences of this. The first is the job isn't done. The risks that that have been posed to us over time regarding safe water, regarding food safety, for example, are only controlled because of the constant vigilance of people like my colleagues in health protection. And I really would like to shout out to Sandra Falconer, Susie Sarkis and Danny Satoris for all of the fantastic expertise that they have provided in protecting Victorians particularly, the kind of hidden insurance against the risks that we know about and also emerging risks. So a round of applause to my former colleagues. Thank you. The second kind of consequence or implication is that whilst we've managed to do a good job for many people, we also have huge inequities. We have inequities within countries and we have inequities between countries. And I think this is the point where Brett throws himself flaming onto the stage. And then the third consequence, which we've also talked about already, is planetary boundaries. We have made all of these gains whilst completely ignoring the impact that we're having on the natural environment. And as Prof. Ratnatunga said, we have already crossed 6 of 9 planetary boundaries. We talk a lot about climate change, and that is perhaps the one that is most visible. But there are other very serious boundaries that we've crossed, including biodiversity loss, as Brett was mentioning, which is kind of clearly existential. So yes, definitely the biggest health threat of the 21st century. And the challenges here are extremely complex, as Brett was outlining, and very, very urgent. But they're not insurmountable. And I think, when I think about how I work with other professions, be it housing, be it water engineers, be it architects, be it management accountants, what I try and do is find out where do we have common ground? Where is it strong so we can fix what's wrong, to coin a term from Cormac Russell. And I think we're both public health and management accountancy are about value creation. They are about making sure that resources are allocated where they can have most impact and create most value. We're both about measuring performance. We both have quite sophisticated measures for that. We both have a focus on risk management, governance and accountability. And I think, while we're thinking about these huge complex challenges that Brett was talking about, there really are 3 key things we need to do. One is that we need to have the technological know-how, and I'd argue that for most of these challenges we've got a pretty good idea. We've generally had a technological approach to most of these problems. The second thing we need to do is have really robust governance and proper funding flows. And I think if you look at what happened at COP29 last week, we can't possibly say that at the moment we have the right governance in place or that funding is being allocated correctly or sufficiently for the value that we want to see, which is protecting both life and the planet. And then I think the third thing that we have to address is hearts and minds. This isn't just a technological problem or solution. It's really about our values, our emotions. And I think that's where health can sometimes play a really important role in bringing these really quite big abstract problems back down to the personal. I think the other area which is really important, and again we've touched on it, is the youth voice in this. They are the ones who are really going to have to clean up the mess that our generations have made. So the more that we can listen to them, elevate those voices, the better. While perhaps the big picture isn't going so well, I think there are some promising things that are happening at that more micro level. We've got quite a good focus now on compliance and risk management. If you think about the Task Force for Climate Risk Disclosure, the increasing emphasis on sustainability as part of fiduciary duties of boards, I think we're making some progress from that side of things. And from the health perspective, we're definitely making some progress in terms of understanding our own impact on the planet and also the risks that are coming ahead and how we can best mitigate them. So I think we really do need to work together, whether we're coming from a planetary economics or a planetary health background, to consider the impacts of our day-to-day decisions on both people's health now and in the future and the planet. And I think that makes good business sense. I think it makes good governance, and I think it's good for public health as well. So we all have a role to play, whether we're in the private sector, whether we're in public, whether we're in academia, whether we're in the civil society. And I think there is much that we can do. So thank you so much for this accolade. I really do very much appreciate it. And I very much hope that we can work together to make sure we get the right resources in the right place and at the right time.